All right, I want to welcome everybody to this week's meeting of the Northern New England chapter of SABR. I'm Bruce McClure, the chapter chair. We'll get started with our guest speaker in just a minute, but first I want to introduce Joanne Hulbert, co-chair of SABR's Music and Poetry Committee. Joanne resides in Mudville, a venerable old neighborhood of Holliston, Massachusetts, a town rich in early baseball history. A distant cousin of William Hulbert, she accepts no responsibility, familial or otherwise, for the formation of the National League. And contrary to the popular presumption, she'll tell you that there can be joy in Mudville. Joanne has a poem to kick off tonight's festivities. So Joanne, you're up.
Okay. I was very interested to see that Joe Ross was going to come on and talk about nicknames, because that apparently is an interest that we both have. We have our own areas of interest when it comes to nicknames. I don't think it's the same as mine. How could anybody be as perverse as mine? But anyway, it's a great subject. I had spoken at a presentation with the Fred a few years ago in regard to it. And it is an ongoing search whenever I go through the newspapers, because baseball nicknames really follow a history of the game itself. So the one I'm going to read this time, though, happens to have one of those classic nicknames within it. And first of all, at the end, at the end of it, you're going to, I want to know how many people recognize what that nickname is. And the second is there's a certain batting average, and let's see who can come up with it too, or can recall. So anyway, the poem, the title is Hugh Duffy. What boy of 15 years ago struck not his postures thus and so, to show just how Hugh Duffy caught the ball, just how he hit it in the tricks with it, the craftiest of all those that win, when Huey was a heavenly twin. Today, Comiskey wants his socks revamped, and Hugh as fresh as when we lamped his young face at the big league door, strides on the big league deck once more to teach the young ideal to hug the plate, perchance like him to hit for, what was his batting average in 1897?
Rhymes with 8.
Yeah.
Yes. Using hand signals. What was that?
I said, does it end in 8?
It ends in 8.
Go ahead and unmute Dixie. Tell us what you 440. Ken Castro's at 440.
Well, pretty damn close. 438.
438.
Plus, he had a twin, but who was the other heavenly twin? Since he was a twin. Oh, this is a very, very important question.
Dixie's on the case here. I can see it coming.
Yeah,
McCarthy.
Yes, McCarthy. Tommy McCarthy. Woo-hoo. That's right. Yeah. Now the story is that really hits me on this one is that many years ago, my brother, who lives out in California, he's standing in the checkout line at a store out there. And apparently in the store, they would put up a sign on a trivia question and up over the cash register. And I guess if you, got the right answer or something, you got a discount or you free stuff, whatever it was. So anyway, the question was who had the greatest, best batting average in Major League Baseball. All right, so he's in a line and everything, and there's people ahead of them, and they go, "Oh, was it Ted Williams?" Oh no, it's not Ted Williams. Well, he got on his phone to call me because he figured I might know the answer to that, and he called me, but I wasn't home. So about a week or so later, he called me and he said, "Hey, there was this question and everything." He says, "Could you have told me who it was that had the best batting?" I said, Yeah, it was Hugh Duffy, but you also got to, you got to say also Tommy McCarthy, because they were the heavenly twins. And I said, maybe you would have gotten a bonus point for that, like 1 week's groceries. I don't know what. But he was quite disappointed that I wasn't home. So.
Like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Phone a friend.
Right, exactly. exactly what it was. And I never did find out what he was that he was going to win, whether it was just a 10% discount or whether it was free groceries for a year. I have no idea. All he knows is everybody was all saying, "Oh no, it's Ted. I know it's Ted." No, everybody says Ted Williams, because that was an easy one. But of course, they had to reach back into the 19th century in order to come up with the answer. But that's the Heavenly Twins, and they're both buried at Mount Calvary Cemetery in Boston. We did make a pilgrimage several years to them and several others. They're in that same cemetery, which is contiguous with Mount Hope, which has another whole team of players over there, and it's a marvelous time. So anyway, so if you need to fill any time at the very end, I do have the Red Sox poem in order to make us feel worse.
Oh, you know what? I don't think we are going to leave here tonight without hearing that Red Sox poem, Joanne. So don't forget it. All right.
I get it at the ready just in case.
Please do.
Yeah. So Joe shall send us off into nickname land. It's a great place to play.
Yes, he will. All right. Now, everyone has had a nickname at one time or another. When I was in high school, some of my friends nicknamed me Padre, and it wasn't because I was a fan of the San Diego Padres. It was because my dad was a congregational minister. I bet you can think of a few nicknames you've been called throughout your life, whether they were complimentary or not. For example, think Babe. Who would you associate that nickname with? Most are going to say Babe Ruth. But there are 32 players whose nicknames is Babe. And that isn't even the most prolific nickname. There are 42 Buds and 46 Bucks. Nearly 190 players were nicknamed Lefty, most of them pitchers. Red appears as a nickname more than 140 times, presumably when the player had hair. Doc or similar nicknames appeared 100 times, and some of those players were actually doctors. The Nicknames of Major League Baseball by Joseph Ross and Richard Reneboot explores nicknames for players who performed on the major league level. For those who like food, there's everything from buttermilk to yams. Whether your taste buds run toward breakfast, dinner, snacks, lunch, or treats, a nickname is here to describe it all. There are animals from ant to weasel, birds from bird to warbler, and fantasy characters from dragon to werewolf. It's getting down a weird path, Joe. SABR member Joseph Ross is the owner of Rostam Publishing right here in New Hampshire. He is its chief editor and the co-author of tonight's book. He's been involved in sports for many years, serving as an official in basketball and soccer, and has served in baseball as an official scorer, scoreboard operator, and color commentator. Joe also prepares and distributes a daily email feature entitled Today in Baseball History, distributed every day of the year to subscribers across the continent. And we welcome him this evening. Joe Ross, it's a pleasure to have you here tonight. Usually I say welcome to Northern New England, but you live here.
Thank you very much. As a matter of fact, I also lived down in Joanne's area. The first house I ever bought was in Randolph.
Oh,
Okay.
So I know the area. I didn't do much in sports there. Excuse me. I was involved up here and in Randolph and in all of Massachusetts, actually, as a basketball referee first. And I have to tell you that I was the youngest basketball referee in the world for 2 years. The reason is simple. I took the test before I was old enough to take the test, and nobody told me I wasn't old enough. So I took it, passed it, and I refereed. As a matter of fact, I refereed my first game when I was 13. That was before I took the test, obviously.
Oh my gosh. I was actually going to start out by saying, Joe, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? But he just jumped right in and got going. This is great. Now, you were a high school basketball referee at 13 years old?
No. I didn't referee high school at 13 because I passed the test at 17. And somebody afterwards, I don't know how long afterwards, told me you have to be 18 to take the test. So I just said, oh, okay. And that was that. I refereed CYO, boys club type stuff, lower level, including some Park League type things after that. As a matter of fact, I have some funny stories, especially Joanna love it because they're Boston related stories in basketball. Like one game I walked into the gym, looked around, and I said, they can't possibly play here because it's too small. The ceiling is 11 feet. You can't play there. They played there. It was City of Boston. That's where they played. That's where they played. There was one game I remember getting to early. I always got there early, as I did tonight. Bruce will tell you I was the first one around very early tonight because that's just me. But I walked into a gym during the JV game and saw there was only one official. Somebody had not shown up. So I very quickly got dressed and joined the game in the middle. And one of the players looked at me and said, "Oh, about time you got here." And I looked at him and I smiled and I said, "You got to be careful because I'm really the varsity referee." Oops, is his answer. And that was that. In terms of baseball, I started as the official scorer for the Nashua Pride. While I was the official scorer, I also became the color commentator for the visiting team because in the minor leagues, they didn't send play-by-play and color to the game. They only sent one person. So I jumped right in and did it. One of the people I worked with was a fellow by the name of Mike Capps, a very, very good announcer who worked for ABC before he decided he didn't like news and went into sports. And he was the play-by-play man for the Atlantic City Surf. And he had always done a Today in Baseball segment that he had a sponsor for and had trouble finding stuff. So I said, sounds like there might be a business here. And I started doing it. And that was many, many years ago, obviously. And I've been doing it ever since. Mike still takes it. He still gets it every morning. Although now he's with Nolan Ryan's club in Round Rock, Texas, the Round Rock Express.
Dan Evans just put that up in the chat. Mike Capps has been the play-by-play guy for the Round Rock Express for 20 plus. That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So that tells you how long I've been doing Today in Baseball. In fact, my favorite time talking with Mike on the air was one day Atlantic City was playing at Nashua, and the Atlantic City batter was in the warm-up circle, obviously. And he had done all the things he has to do that are sponsored, because obviously I can't interrupt that. And then I started talking about it's a beautiful night here at the beautiful Holman Stadium in downtown Nashua, and we're really looking forward to a great game between the Atlantic City Surf and the host, Nashua Pride. It's a great night for baseball. And I just kept going. And he started to look at me because he was getting a little nervous. And as the batter headed toward the batter's box, I picked the right moment, obviously. And I said, and so we're looking forward to a great game. But right now, the surf's up. Here's Mike. He did a double take, but never missed a word.
Perfect. So I wanted to start off. Joe, you're great. You just kind of shifted from first to fourth there on me and went right along. It's great. How did you get to be a baseball fan? Who was your first team? Who was your first player? What got you into the sport?
That's a tough question because, of course, I grew up when Ted Williams was the biggie, and then Carl Yastrzemski. Of course, I'm from the Boston area, so the Red Sox were my team, although in most of those days, you don't really want to say that out loud because you never know who's going to hit you. When I had my son in high school, they had many, many rainouts. And those of you from New England can relate to the fact that it's been raining a lot. So
Oh,
they
God.
had a whole bunch of games in consecutive days. And there is a rule in New Hampshire that a pitcher can only pitch so many innings a week. So I said to my son, who was the manager, he plays about as well as I do, so he was the manager. And I said, the way you solve that is you have every pitcher pitch 1 inning. Now they can pitch all week because they won't go anywhere near the maximum. And they're always fresh and they can do it and get through the season. I don't think they did it, but I thought that was a great idea. Then I had a friend who was the first general manager of the Nashua Pride, whose name I've forgotten already. And he said, go there and apply because you can do the job there. Because I had been an official scorer in basketball as well as being a referee. I went in, my son became the clubhouse boy. I became the official scorer. I became the color commentator a little bit later, just because the guy looked like he needed help. They all did. I had an experience because there was one person in the stands at every Pride game, and he always referred to me as his guru because unlike many of the people who did it, I actually read the rule book many times, as a matter of fact. So when he had a question, he would ask, and I would actually be able to tell him the answer as to why something was what it was because of the rule. And that is something most people don't know. I can tell you a funny story. Actually, it wasn't funny, about my dealing with How Sports Data, the company that does statistics for minor league baseball. I had a Pride game where the pitcher who started the game did not go long enough. The team had a lead. Now, that's the only time the official scorer gets to pick the winning pitcher, as I'm sure you all know. The next pitcher in, which is usually the one that gets the win, was really not quite good. So I gave it to the pitcher after that. Howe changed it to the second guy in, and I called up, and having a temper, I screamed at him. And he said, nobody else knows that rule. So my answer was, just because nobody else knows the rule doesn't mean we shouldn't apply it properly. He didn't like that answer, but that was the way, and he wouldn't change it either. But that's the way it goes. But that was my beginning as the official scorer for the Nashua Pride.
That's very interesting. Next week, we're actually going to have one of the official scorers from the Boston Red Sox, Lauren Fox. I'll be interested to see as if he watches this prior to his appearance and has something to say about that. That'll be a very interesting conversation.
Well, you know,
Go ahead.
I assume at the major league level, they at least are familiar with the rule book.
You would think.
On the minor league level, I'm not so sure because I don't think they do. But that's me.
I know when I was with the New Britain Rockcats years ago, our official scorer was very, very, very well versed in being able to quote chapter and verse from the rule book and carried it with him wherever he went. So there's some out there that are very well versed in their positions and know the book cold.
Oh, I hope so. I wasn't trying to paint with a very broad brush.
Oh, no, I understand that completely. So you've been a Red Sox fan all your life. You've seen the highs and the lows of Red Sox fandom over the years. Joanne had mentioned that in the pregame before we got everybody in here. But what's your take on what went wrong this year? I'm sure you've watched at least a few games or read the Globe, the Herald, our papers up here. What do you think is going on in Boston?
That's a great question. When you watch the lowlights, which is all you can see these days,
Oof.
when I see an outfielder make a play that even I can make and muff it, then, basically I'm ready to close my eyes and go elsewhere. But unfortunately, that's what happens. In fact, just what was it, last night or 2 nights ago, pitcher picked up the ball and threw it to first base, where the first baseman threw his glove to stop it. Now, I can't tell you the chapter and verse, but I know that's illegal. And in fact, it results in a 2-base error or 2-base advance. But I knew that. I don't know how many others did, but that's the kind of thing that really is bad. And the problem I see, they tend to blame the people who are not really responsible for the bad play. They fired Chaim Bloom. I'm not sure Alex Cora is going to make it past the end, although he was a good manager. But it's the players that make the mistakes, not the manager and not the executives. So that's where we are.
What's the old saying? You can't fire the players.
Well, that's not necessarily true. Look at Colorado football with Deion Sanders. He fired everybody and brought in a whole new staff or a whole new group of players. And it worked, obviously. So
Let's talk a little bit about this book, Nicknames of Major League Baseball. Now, you self-published this book.
I did.
You own the Rostrum Publishing right here in New Hampshire.
Right.
How did you get the idea for this book? What was the genesis for getting this into a volume?
I'm not sure I can even answer that question, to be very honest with you. It just seemed like most players have a nickname. I ignored all the dumbass nicknames like Dick for Richard and Bob for Robert, because those are nothing. So I just ignored them. I was looking for the unusual ones, like the ones on the cover that you read earlier, because those are the interesting ones. And what I decided was, if I'm going to do this, the information is available in any number of places. Hopefully not in the same format that I did it, but it's available. So I have to do something different if I'm going to do it. So I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to include the teams they played for, first year, last year. I'm not going to give you the whole lineup. I'm going to tell you where the nickname came from, if I know. Many of them, of course, I don't know. If somebody's a doc whatever and is a doctor, that's pretty obvious. If someone, Whitey is pretty obvious too, unless you look at somebody who's completely bald by the time you read it. But I mean, that's where the name came from. So that was really what I did in order to get there. The idea of publishing it myself came about because when I wrote the first book I ever wrote, which is called Fast Track for Caregivers, with my wife, as a matter of fact, I went to a lot of the publishing houses. No one wanted to answer me, so I did it myself. And that was tough, but that's how you got to do it. And I looked at what they're going to offer. And I said, you know what? I was in the printing business before. I can do all of this stuff ahead of them. I can probably do it better. And I think I did. So I said at that point, if this book sells, I can make more money this way than I can with a publishing house. And that's absolutely true. And I tell that to everybody who comes to me as an author who wants me to publish their book. the fact is, you go to a regular publishing house and you manage to get a contract, they'll give you maybe a $500 advance if you're really lucky and your name is not Stephen King or James Patterson. You may get a $500 advance. You won't see another penny because independent authors don't sell a lot of books unless they do it themselves, which is the only way you can do it anyway. If you sell 250 books with me, you probably will make more money than you would have made going to sell 5,000 books with a standard publisher, because that's the way it is. The other thing I do, I want my books to look just like the New York publishing houses, with every bit of professionalism, very big editing, and a lot of it to make it as perfect as I can make it. Even though it says Nashua, New Hampshire on it, it still looks like a professional work. And that's where most independent authors get a bad name. They don't go through the editing process the way it should. So basically, that's how this all came about. And then when I did it, I frankly didn't realize I was writing a 400-page book. I expected it to be somewhat like most other books. But once I was into it that far, I was not prepared to abandon it. And that's where we are.
What was that process like for you? What did you use to research these nicknames of ball players, and how did you get from the start to the process to the finished product?
Okay.
Nicknames is just such a broad thing
Yes.
for me.
Well,
Tell me
the
more
first
about the process there,
the first thing I had to do was to decide what wasn't going in the book. And that was the Dick for Richard and Peter, Pete for Peter, things like that, that are the normal everyday nicknames that everybody uses everywhere. Jeff for Jeffrey. I'm not doing that. That's a waste of time. So the first thing I did is I went to Baseball Reference, which has a pronunciation guide and a nickname guide. And I started with them. And then I went to the players page to see what was there. And then I went to most of the articles written by SABR members who did some of the research on each individual name. In fact, I'm just looking because I think it's important. If you look at, let's see, the back of the book has acknowledgments, which every name I can remember or had of whose work I took. There are like 2.5 full pages of names in it, and they're mostly SABR members. In fact, they're almost all SABR members, I think. The rest is just compiling, deciding how to format it, and make it look pretty.
Did you speak to any ball players when you did this? Did you get a chance to speak to anybody that?
No, this was strictly a research project.
Okay. Unusual nicknames. We all know Petey and Babe and Whitey and Red and Doc and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You found a lot of unusual nicknames when you did this, right?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about some of the most unusual nicknames that have been used in the century and a half that has been Major League Baseball.
Oh boy.
Aha.
If I go just anywhere, Whoopla. Why would anybody be named Whoopla?
Whoopla. Now tell me about this ball player. Whoopla?
Whoopla is Will White. And I can't tell you anything without looking him up. Hold on.
I can only imagine being in his clubhouse and saying, "Hey, Whoopla, come here
Yeah.
for a sec." What in? Okay, that's a name and a half.
White Wings, remember that?
Yeah, White Wings.
That's George Thibault, I think. Whiz, Johnny G. And then there's the ones that are really strange, like Whoa Bill. Now you'd think that his first name would be Bill, William, Will, something like that, right? That belongs to Chauncey Fisher. I don't know how you get from Chauncey Fisher to Whoa Bill. It's just,
Chauncey to Whoa Bill.
yeah,
That's a long walk.
thank you.
That's
It
a
is,
very
and I
long
have no
walk.
idea. I mean, that's a different section. What I did is I put the book into two sections because otherwise it would be an index that's outrageous. So the beginning of the book is the names. The end of the second half of the book is by nickname, which is how I knew how many Whiteys there were and how many White Bear and how many what was the last Whiteys. Because in addition to Whiteys, there's a White Wings, White Shark, White Rat, White Fang, White Bear, Whitey Ball, White Bear, White Bird. That's it for that.
I'll tell you. Alex Stays just put up in the chat here one of his favorite nicknames that everybody here is going to know: Oil
Of
Can.
course. Oil Can Boyd.
Oil Can Boyd. He was something. As a matter of fact, one of the first guys I saw, I can remember seeing pitch live. The first one I remember is Bill Lee in person, but Oil Can's another one from.
But the interesting part is where that came from.
Yeah. Okay. Go
People
ahead.
know. Okay, that came from the fact that he was from Mississippi. And in Mississippi, oil was a slang term for beer. He claimed that an ice cold beer went down so smooth, it was like drinking oil. Lo and behold, Oil Can.
Like drinking oil. You know, I remember Dennis Boyd, and I remember him being just a little bit left of center, and you have confirmed that for me. What were some of your favorite nicknames that you found?
Oh, God, I
in
love them
reading?
all. You know, Harry Boyles was nicknamed Stretch. Why? He was 6'5". That's a normal nickname, right? Stretch.
True.
Okay.
True. I was looking at the chat as you were talking there. Dixie just kind of had a great comment. The nickname that most nickname stories begin with is Charlie, Death to Flying Things Ferguson from the 19th century. I don't recall that in the book. Was that in the book? Was that in your book? I don't recall.
I don't remember. What was it? Death to flying thing?
Death to Flying Things Ferguson.
Yep.
Was he?
Actually, there's another one. Jack Chapman was death to flying things because he chased down fly balls.
And Dixie shaking his head, yes. So that's very interesting. Yiddish Curver, Barney Peltry from Ken Castro. Mark Hoyle, Kurt Blefari's nickname was Clank. Those were the I remember Clank Blefari. I remember that when I was a kid. This book was published in 21. Is that correct? Do I recall that
Yes.
correctly? In 21.
Yes.
Have you or are you going to update this book
You know,
moving forward?
that's a great question. I don't know. I have thought about it. I'm not sure there's enough sales to warrant it at this point. Otherwise, I probably would. But meanwhile, I got another one that I'm working on anyway, based on my other feature, the Today in Baseball History feature,
And we're going to get to that in a minute.
where I'm picking out my working title, which obviously may not last, is the Wild and Wacky Game of Baseball. And right now I'm just collecting items, and then I will sort them into things that make sense. Like there'll be a section on the umpires, a section on the fans, things like that. But it's a little early yet to get there.
A couple of things from the chat as we've been discussing Joe Ross's book. Dan Evans put up the schnoz.
Ken Harrelson, probably.
Was that Kenny? Dan? Sue Nelson writes, how come modern nicknames are so lame? They're all just a version of their first or last names.
Yep, some of them are terrible.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's just we've lost that idea of having fun with somebody and giving them a nickname like that? Or
that's a good question I can't answer.
Could be a lot of things. Dr. Strangeglove is another great nickname from the
Dr.
60s.
Strangeglove was a Red Sox player.
Right. That's right.
Because he couldn't catch a ball at first base. Or at least not enough of them. Dick Stewart's right.
Dick Stewart, yep.
Yeah.
Let's see, a few others. Ernie Lombardi was the schnoz. Mark Hoyle has one of his, George High Pockets Kelly.
Yeah.
And Lon Hildreth suggested Piano Legs Hickman. And Karen Halloran, now this is a very interesting one that she just came up with. She's mentioned Dummy Boy. And what we're finding with nicknames like that, and I'm going to preface this comment by saying, Karen, don't think that I am denigrating you in any way, shape, or form. But you're seeing a lot of those nicknames that these days can be considered derogatory and whatnot, and Karen shaking her head, yes, I appreciate that, that are being deleted from Baseball Reference. And I think Joe can confirm it when I say this, that you're seeing a lot of those insensitive type nicknames that are being sort of erased from history.
But, I don't take them out of the book just because of that, and won't take them out of the book.
Well, that's a very good, interesting comment.
They were put in, they were what they were when they were.
Yes,
If they're
I
not
just thought that
appropriate
was kind of
now.
an interesting one. I thought that was a very interesting
Sure.
nickname.
Yep.
Or some people would find it offensive.
Yes. Yeah, it is. A lot of those nicknames that we know of over, from years going by, Chief Bender, Dummy Hoy, a lot of that stuff. Interesting how they came about. Joe, correct me if I'm wrong. There were a lot of, some of it was ethnic, some of it was, now Dummy Hoy, if I recall correctly, was either
deaf.
hearing impaired or deaf.
Both. Deaf mute.
Players took a lot of the characteristics of their teammates and turned them into nicknames, right, wrong, or indifferent. In some cases, it was a dig.
Yeah,
Joe,
of course.
does that line up, Joe?
Yeah. Now, Dummy Hoy was deaf and mute. He had meningitis as a child.
Mm-hmm.
That's what caused it. He carried that nickname for his entire career, basically, because that was the way they did it.
Dixie has got his hand up. Dixie Trango.
Yes, I've run into something very particular in the last couple of years doing biographies. And it is, there is a player named Highball Wilson who pitched in the the first decade of 20th century. Anyway, Highball Wilson, I looked at his career almost game by game because it was only a 5-year career. No one ever called him Highball. There was no reference to his drinking. There was nothing ever said about him being Highball Wilson. And it seems like the name has come up or was given to him later by someone somewhere for unknown reasons. And I don't understand why this is, but we are dealing with that sort of thing now here in the late 20th and 21st century of people, maybe writers, maybe researchers, giving people names that they never really had.
Well, that's
Yeah,
fascinating.
that's true.
Go.
But you know, where do you draw the line if you're going to do that? Now, Highball was actually Howard. That was his name. Howard Paul Wilson,
Yes.
who played 1899 to 1904 for the Spiders, Athletics, and Senators. I don't know where he got the name Highball, but that's what it was.
Well, I went looking for it, and I read just about every game that he pitched because there weren't very many. And it was never there, not even a reference to him drinking.
No, they had to be a reference or I wouldn't have had it. So there's a reference somewhere. I can't tell you where. But in the Wilsons, I mean, you got Chief Wilson. That's because he resembled the chief of the Texas Rangers. Somebody said that. So all of a sudden he became chief. There are also other chiefs, most of whom had some Indian, either a look or a background or something like that.
Pete Bender.
And then you got Hack Wilson. That one everybody knows, right? Hack Wilson, because he resembled a wrestler by the name of George Hackenschmidt. So therefore, he became Hack. He was also known as Mr. 5x5. I'm assuming he was built that way. He was 5'6", 195 pounds. So maybe he looked at the 5x5.
Mark Hoyle just put up one of his favorite nicknames, the human rain delay himself, Mike Hargrove. Ken Castro has a very interesting question. His question is this: is there substance in the theory that the Bugs nickname, prevalent in dead ball and 19th century baseball, was directly placed on the heavy drinkers on a team?
Well, I think they in my next book, you're going to see some of that, because the players were not always as nice as they are today, assuming they're nice. Players today, I find, give a lot back. They set up foundations, they work with kids, they do a lot of really good stuff. Some of it is in the next book because it was an unusual thing, like the 3 players who saved somebody from a fire type of thing happened. In the old days, they weren't like that, I don't think. In fact, it's not in the book, but I know that Ty Cobb, when he died, not one player attended his funeral. So he was obviously not what you would call popular. Now, Human Rain Delay had 2 people, Pedro Baez and Mike Hargrove. Were both known as Human Rain Delay. Now, sometimes that kind of reference would come from one game because he delayed enough so the game would be called before lights and before rain delays that cause things like that. And that's an art, or it was. Now I don't think the umpires put up with it quite as much. But that was, I mean, in terms of human, there's also a human office building, which is Edward Love, no idea why. Human hat pin, human giraffe, human eyeball, human crash test dummy. Go figure that one out. Human crab. I mean, there's all human, I think. Human ripcord, human skyscraper, human vacuum cleaner. That one I think everybody
Brooksy.
knows. That's Brooks Robinson. Because when he was at third base, he got everything that was near him. So that's where it came from. So, there are those kinds of things that happen all the time. And I agree that the nicknames of today are not as good as the nicknames used to be in the old days.
Let's shift gears. Let's talk a little bit about your email list today in baseball history. You were kind enough to add me to it, and I find it to be a very interesting read each morning. Tell us a little bit about how that got started, how you have collated. We talked a little bit about that before we started the Zoom this evening.
Sure.
But give me a little primer on your email list.
Back when I was the official scorer for the National Pride and the color commentator for other teams when they sent in their one-man show, Mike Capps worked for the Atlantic City Surf, and he always looked for Today in Baseball items because he had a sponsor for it. And on one day we were just talking, and he mentioned that he was having trouble finding enough items to fill that spot. So I said to myself, there ought to be something there that could be some kind of a business eventually, I hope. So I started doing the research. That's what I do. I'm a researcher. And I built a database back in the days before there were databases, because I don't do a database. I actually do it all in Word, and I make two files. One is a general file that has every sport that I have. Baseball's not the only one, although it's the only one I'm sending, where I keep anything that I find that interesting or record setting or that sort of thing. And then there are 366 of those files. And then I have 366 other files that are strictly baseball. And I update them in the one and transfer it to the other so that they're all up to date as of the day I prepare them, not the day I send them, because they all sent on a different day. I started that because back about, I don't even know how many years ago now, I went to the minor league baseball show and actually had a booth there, table, where I did meet some interesting people, among them Mike Veck and his group. At the time, they owned 5 minor league clubs. And one of their executives came over and said, "Gee, can I add this list to all 5? Sure." The intent was that it would be available to broadcasters and reporters for free as long as they carry my ad. In other words, shared advertising. Must carry mine, may add one more of their own. Still waiting to get a good national sponsor for it, but that's another whole story. And I started building that, and lo and behold, it's been used ever since. Mike Capps will tell you it's the best baseball history item that there is. I happen to agree with him, but then I'm prejudiced. So that's where it all started, and it now is very big, to the tune of, oh God, I think it goes out to 40 or 50 people around the country. And I know it had teams everywhere from Canada to Texas and everywhere from California to New England. Goes out every single day of the year at 8 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. It actually goes out twice, because there's one person who does a weekly show and wanted it for the whole week. So I do his for the week and then send the other one out on the day that it's due. Actually, I got to put in my plug now. I'm sure you don't mind. It's $15.75 for anyone to sign up for a year. Because you're in SABR, I'll do it for $10. So anybody who wants to sign it up and tells me they're SABR members, $10 will get you a year of Today in Baseball history. Based on whatever day I start sending it to you. I do them like a week ahead of time. Actually, they're done basically 2 weeks ahead of time. So the only thing I have to adjust is if somebody is one hit away from hitting the top 20, for instance, I can't put in there that he's in the top 20 because he's not. And I can't put in that he's not because he might be by the time it's read. So I will take that one and say he's in the top 25 for that time. And then next year it'll change because he won't be in the top 25. He'll be in the top 20. So, that's the kind of thing I go through when I prepare them once a week. I do a whole week at a time. Takes the whole day. But that's what I do.
Let's open it up to questions or comments from the crew here. If anybody has anything they would like to share or add to our discussion. You can unmute yourself. Most of you have been muted. Let's go to Alec. Unmute yourself and go get him.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks. Yeah, I think in the nickname front, I think perhaps they were maybe creatures of newspaper accounts and the written word. And now that people are kind of, broadcasting live, and I would say they don't have to embellish as much, and the players are right in front of people. They don't really try to make the players' personalities more prevalent, and also there's some less teasing, as noted earlier. But just wondering whether people think that has any merit.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. Let's go to Sean Moore. Sean, you're up.
Yeah, thanks. This is a little whimsical. So I once did about 37 seconds of intense Google research on this, but I noticed that there's a lot of baseball players, they're redheaded, and they tend to be either nicknamed Red or Rusty. And then I did a little bit more Google research, and I found that pitchers who are nicknamed Red or Rusty, or excuse me, pitchers tend to be nicknamed Red instead of Rusty, although there's some Rusty pitchers. Position players tend to be nicknamed Rusty and rarely Red. And I don't know, it's kind of a whimsical thing. Have you ever noticed anything about that, or why are pitchers more likely to be nicknamed Red versus Rusty?
That's interesting. I can tell you, I've never noticed that difference myself. So the answer to that from my point of view is no. Most of the pitchers, the big distinction is nobody's nicknamed Lefty unless they're a pitcher.
True.
Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are many more lefties, but none of them are pitchers. For some reason or other, Lefty seems to be a pitcher-only nickname when they can't find anything better.
And nobody's nicknamed Righty.
That's true. I've never.
I'll differ on Lefty O'Doul.
He's got a point.
I will differ on that statement with Lefty O'Doul.
He's got a
So
point.
There are exceptions, of course.
In fact,
I just wanted on record that it was pretty impressive that he did all that research in 37 seconds. That was pretty cool. You know what?
And I'll just say, I always assumed Lefty O'Doul was a pitcher, but I guess he's not.
Right? He's not. That's right. I just want, that is a true SABR member right there who can do all that research in 37 seconds. That is commendable. Jim Laurie, you're up.
I'm a little, I won't say confused, but I noticed that you have no nicknames that you've spoke about today about any of the Negro League players.
When
a lot of them are quite colorful.
when I did the book, the Negro Leagues were not considered a major league. So they would be in the next one. Obviously, I believe some are if they've hit the major leagues at all. But I limited it to the major leagues only. And the Negro Leagues at the time I was writing this were not considered major leagues, even though nowadays they would be.
I have a favorite player that has a nickname and an unusual story of Blackie Schwab. Are you familiar with him?
Not offhand. Spell it.
SCHWAB. He pitched for the St. Louis Browns, and he was convicted of murder almost as soon as he finished pitching.
Mhm.
That's very interesting.
Hmm.
Susan, you had something you wanted to add. Go ahead, Susan.
Yeah, I was just going to mention Lefty O'Doul did some pitching
I,
in his life. So
Yep.
that's probably where he got the lefty.
there you go.
I knew it.
Bob LeMoyne says, this is probably to Jim. He says, you mean he killed it on the mound?
No,
But,
he was convicted of murder. I think later that year.
Bob will be here all week, folks. Tip your server and try the veal. That's fantastic. Okay, Joe, tell us how we can get in touch with you, how we can find this book, how we can get this book, how we can get in on Today in Baseball History. Give us the elevator pitch.
Okay, the easiest way to get in touch with me is to go to www.rostrum, ROSS, take off on my name, obviously, TRUM publishing.com, and just click on the book you want. If you are ordering as a SABR member, do not click on it and pay through PayPal that way. You have to send me a separate PayPal with the lower amount and just tell me what it's for in PayPal, and I will accept that and take it from there. We accept PayPal, obviously, under the same email address. If you need to talk to me, I'll give you a phone number. I'm not proud. It's 603-930-0034. That's my cell phone, which I do not carry with me all the time. I sleep late because I'm very old. Probably older than most of you. In fact, I'll guarantee I'm older than most of you. And I sleep late and I quit early because I'm old. So that's basically what I do. But I do listen to the messages if you leave one. If you don't leave a message, you will not get a call back.
So there.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's fantastic. All right,
And
Joe,
also,
there's been a lot of, go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
there is an email address for Rostrum Publishing, and that is rostrumpublishing@gmail.com.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. I love talking about nicknames and some of that unusual stuff with baseball throughout the years. That for me, it's a lot more fun at times than we're talking about. Oh my God, did you see what that guy did at 3-2? And he let's have some fun with this, you know. let's get weird for a while. Let's get weird. It's a lot of fun. Dixie's got a little something he wants to offer.
I want to take this opportunity, which seems really good, to tell everybody on the screen something that I've already told Bruce and Joanne. And that is the other night at 2:30 in the morning, I never go to bed. I was surfing the net. For stuff, and I thought of podcasts. I very seldom listen to podcasts, but I was wondering if Peter Gammons ever did a podcast. And it came upon, I just wrote Peter Gammons podcast, baseball, and up popped, this is from Google, so you can just type that in. Up on Google came up Bob Ryan. the Globe sports guy, talking to Peter Gammons, his fellow Globe sports guy, about baseball for 90 minutes. If you want to listen to great stories by two crazy people who love baseball, 90 minutes, just write in Google, Bob Ryan Podcast, Season 2, Episode 6, and Peter Gammons, and just type that in, and it's bound to come up for you, and you get 90 minutes of baseball.
I'll have to get that link and send it out in a Monday message. Thanks, Dixie. I appreciate that.
Before you quit, I was talking to an older guy who has since passed away before we did it, who told me once that he knew a ball player years and years ago because the real ball players put their pants on inside out. So they would put the legs up to the knees or under the knees. And then when the two legs are in, pull the rest of the pants up. Because real ball players didn't wear the legs all the way down to the ankles.
Oh, he's got a point. That's true. Let's I want to go back to Joanne Hulbert, who is going to read us her poem on what's wrong with the Red Sox.
Oh, yes. And
Please.
bear in mind that this was written in 1910. So we've been there, done that more than once. So, that's just the way life is with Red Sox land. Anyway, this is out of the Boston American. William F. Kirk wrote it. He was one of those baseball writers, syndicated columnists that would invariably start any of his columns with poetry. So, that's kind of the nice thing about him. Anyway, okay. Title of it is The Sports Soliloquy. Say, what's wrong with the Red Sox? They were going great for a while, fielding like shadows in summer and hitting the ball a mile. Now they are running backward, ripe for regrets and flowers. Draw me a beer, kind waiter, and draw me a gloom, Tom Powers. Say, what's the matter with Wood? Is there, or just put any other of the Red Sox pitchers insert there where Wood is. Is there something wrong with his wing? They say he was stale in April, but they say that was every spring. Monday, he lost to the Naps. Insert another team. Well, the teardrops fell in showers. Draw me a beer, kind waiter, and draw me a gloom, Tom Powers. I'll leave out the one about the Rhode Island racers, but that's okay. Anyway, the thing is that I really feel that a lot of the 19th century and early 20th century writers were a lot better at handing out nicknames. They use Shakespeare, they use classic literature, plays, vaudeville and Broadway, everything like that. You would find all of that stuff out there. They would use literature and they would pull it out. It just never ends. And how they would come up with these nicknames. Parisian Bob. There was a guy that was nicknamed Parisian Bob, and story goes, legend perhaps, that he made a trip to Paris at one time off season and came back, and all he would do was talk about Paris, and they couldn't stand it anymore. I said, okay, Parisian Bob. He probably even tried to speak a little French when he went by with him. But I do love the whole idea of intermixing baseball and sports with all kinds of things like literature and whatnot. For instance, in that line in that poem, draw me a beer, kind waiter, and draw me a gloom, Tom Powers. That comes from literature. Go find it.
Love it.
Just to fill that in, Parisian Bob is Bob Carruthers. And his nickname came to him because he negotiated a contract from Paris. He was actually born in Tennessee.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Not Paris, Tennessee, huh?
No.
No, not at all. Yeah, here he really likes Paris. Oh, boy. It never ends.
Next.
Yeah, you could go on and on.
Next week, Monday, September 25th, we have another fantastic guest for everybody here, Lauren Fox. one of the official scorers for the Boston Red Sox, a member of the New Hampshire State Legislature, and a strong advocate for women in baseball is going to be with us. This is sure to be a fantastic and far-reaching talk about both the inner workings of Major League Baseball scoring and how the women's game is quickly gaining in participation and popularity. You are not going to want to miss out on this event. Joe Ross, fellow Northern New England Chapter SABR member, thank you very much for coming out and doing this tonight. We really appreciate you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here, and I appreciate all of you.
All right. Well, we thank everybody for coming out tonight. We're going to get everybody out of here. We'll see everybody next Monday night, September 25th. Same bad time, same bad channel, 7 o'clock right here. Don't miss out. Lauren Fox is going to be with us. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
I know.